Millionaire saw a poor girl playing the song of his childhood love, and her face left him trembling. Before we start, leave a comment telling us which city you're watching from. And at the end, don't forget to rate this story from 0 to 10. Enjoy the story. The crystal chandeliers above the Westbridge Hotel ballroom bathed the crowd in gold. It was the annual Harrington Foundation Gala, a place where deals worth millions were sealed with a handshake and a glass of champagne. At the far end of the hall, Nathaniel Cole, billionaire CEO, sharp black tuxedo, stood with his board members. His expression was the same one he wore in every business magazine cover: composed, unreadable, distant. A waiter brushed past with a tray of hors d'oeuvres. Laughter from an oil magnate's table rose and fell like waves. Somewhere in the background, a soft piano began to play. Nathaniel's glass froze halfway to his lips. That melody. He knew it instantly, the lilting rise, the pause before the third note, the way it lingered in the air like a sigh. It was her song, the song of the girl he'd loved when he was 17, the girl he hadn't seen in over 20 years. He turned toward the sound. The crowd thinned just enough for him to see a small stage tucked against the far wall. And there she was, or rather, a girl. Not the same woman from his past, but someone. She wore a simple, slightly faded dress. Her shoes were scuffed, the kind you'd buy secondhand. Her hair was tied back in a loose braid, a few strands escaping to frame her face as her fingers moved over the keys. There was no music sheet, just memory. Nathaniel's heart beat louder than the applause from the auctioneer's table. He stepped closer, ignoring the curious glances from investors. Near the stage, two women whispered. "She's just the help," one said. "Fills in when the regular pianist can't make it, probably doing it for tip money." The other laughed under her breath. "She plays like she's auditioning for the Met. Cute." The girl's gaze stayed on the piano, but her posture stiffened. She'd heard them. Nathaniel moved again, until he stood just a few feet from the stage. She glanced up for the briefest moment, long enough for him to see her face clearly. And that was when the air left his lungs. It wasn't just that she had the same eyes as his first love. It was the exact same tilt of her smile, the faint dimple on the right, the look of someone who carried 100 untold stories. His grip on the champagne flute tightened. Number. It couldn't be. The final note lingered in the air, then faded into the hum of conversation. She lowered her hands from the keys, gave a small, polite nod to no one in particular, and began to step down from the stage. Nathaniel didn't realize he'd moved until he was blocking her path. "Where did you learn that song?" His voice came out lower than he intended, almost a growl. She blinked, taken aback. "I just know it." "Just know it?" His eyes searched hers. "That song has no sheet music. It's not even recorded anywhere." A flicker of something recognition passed over her face. "I guess I have a good memory," she said softly. Around them, conversations carried on, but Nathaniel felt like the two of them were under a spotlight. Behind him, one of his executives called his name. He didn't turn. "Who taught you that?" "No one," she replied. "I heard it once, a long time ago." The room seemed smaller now. Every instinct told him to press further, but before he could, the event coordinator appeared, placing a hand on the girl's shoulder. "Emma, we need you in the kitchen. They're short-staffed." "Emma." Nathaniel let the name sink in, as she gave him a brief, almost apologetic smile before slipping away into the crowd. His chest felt tight. If she was telling the truth, there was only one way she could have heard that song. And if that was the case, he set his untouched champagne on a passing tray. "Find out everything you can about the girl who just played piano," he told his assistant without looking at him. "Right now?" "Right now." Across the room, Emma disappeared behind a door marked "Staff Only." Nathaniel's gaze lingered on that door as the sound of the piano still echoed in his head. She had his past in her hands. And maybe she had more of his future than he was ready to admit. But before the night was over, he'd make sure to find out. Nathaniel didn't linger in the crowd. He moved through clusters of guests, barely acknowledging the greetings tossed his way. His mind was on one thing, the girl named Emma, the melody, and the way her eyes had held something he couldn't quite name. By the time he reached the staff-only door, his assistant, Mark, had caught up. "She's a temp," Mark said in a low voice. "Hired through an agency to cover kitchen shifts tonight. Lives, well, it's vague. No fixed address on file. Just a P.O. box." Nathaniel's jaw tightened. "That's all?" "For now." "Not good enough." He pushed open the door. The noise of the gala dulled instantly, replaced by the clatter of dishes and the hum of industrial refrigerators. The air was warmer here, scented with garlic and roasting meat. A waiter carrying a tray of champagne glasses swerved to avoid him, eyes wide. Emma was at the far end of the narrow corridor, tucking her braid over her shoulder as she handed a stack of clean plates to another staff member. She looked smaller here, without the glow of the ballroom lights. But the posture straight, deliberate was the same. "Emma," he called. She froze for half a second before turning. "Yes?" Nathaniel walked toward her, his polished shoes silent on the linoleum floor. "Why that song?" She glanced toward the kitchen doorway, as if hoping for an interruption. "Why does it matter?" "It matters," he said evenly, "because I wrote it." Her expression didn't change, but her fingers tightened around the dish towel she was holding. "You wrote it?" she repeated, almost too softly to hear. He nodded once. "When I was 17, I played it only once for someone." "Your childhood love," she finished for him, not as a question. Nathaniel's breath caught. "How do you know that?" She gave a small shrug, the kind people use when they're buying time. "Maybe I overheard it somewhere." "That's impossible," he said. "No one else." A line cook brushed past with a tray of steaming plates, forcing Nathaniel to step aside. When he looked back, she was already halfway down the hall. "Emma," he called again. She stopped but didn't turn. "If you know her, if you know anything, I want to talk. Just talk." She hesitated, then finally faced him. "Talking's dangerous, Mr. Cole." "For who?" "For both of us." And with that, she slipped through the swinging kitchen doors. Nathaniel didn't follow, not yet. Instead, he leaned against the wall, replaying every note of that song in his head. The rhythm, the subtle pause before the third chord, it was exact. Mark reappeared. "I found something else. She signs her name as Emma R. Cole on agency paperwork." Nathaniel's gaze snapped to him. "Cole? That's what it says." The name hit him like a punch. Cole wasn't a common surname in his family's circle, and there was only one person from his past who could have passed it on. Back in the ballroom, the auctioneer was announcing the final lot a weekend at a private Caribbean villa. Applause rippled through the crowd. Nathaniel returned to his table, but his mind wasn't on the bidding. He spotted Emma again, carrying a tray of water glasses to a table of donors. She moved quickly, head down, but not in the way of someone ashamed, more like someone avoiding unnecessary attention. One of the donors waved her away impatiently. She didn't flinch. When their eyes met across the room, she didn't look away this time. It was brief, 3 seconds, maybe, but long enough for him to see something flicker there. Recognition. And guilt? He excused himself from the table, stepping into her path near the side exit. "You're leaving? My shift's over. I can have a car take you home." "I don't need it." Nathaniel glanced at the thin cardigan she'd thrown over her dress. "It's below freezing out. I've handled worse." The exit door's hydraulic hinge hissed as she pushed it open. A gust of winter air swept in, carrying the faint scent of snow. "You can't expect me to ignore this," Nathaniel said. "I don't expect anything from you," she replied without looking back. "That's safer." And then she was gone, disappearing into the dark street lit only by the halo of a flickering lamppost. Nathaniel stood there for a long moment, the cold air stinging his face. He didn't know yet who she really was, or how she'd learned that song. But he knew one thing: this wasn't the last time he'd see her. Because people didn't just walk into his world, play a melody that belonged to his most guarded memory, and walk away without leaving a mark. And whatever truth she was hiding, he was going to find it. Snow dusted the streets by morning, turning the city into a muted watercolor of gray and white. Nathaniel sat in the back of his Blacktown car, watching frost creep along the edges of the window, while Mark scrolled through his tablet. "She's off the grid," Mark said. "No social media, no photos that aren't on an ID badge. Address on file is still that P.O. box." Nathaniel leaned back, his tone even but tight. "And the agency? They won't say more without her permission. Privacy policy." He gave a humorless smile. "They'll talk. Everyone talks." The car slowed in front of Cole Tower, its mirrored glass catching the pale winter sun. Nathaniel stepped out, the chill cutting through his coat, and strode into the marble lobby without acknowledging the greetings from staff. By 9 a.m., he was in his office, the city skyline stretching behind him like a painting. On his desk, a thick manila envelope waited. Mark had dropped it there before heading back to his own floor. Inside were copies of old employment forms, a few pay stubs, and one blurry photocopy of a birth certificate. Emma Ray Cole, born in a small town 2 states away. Mother, Grace Marlowe. Father, unknown. Nathaniel stared at the name Grace until the letters blurred. Grace Marlowe had been his first love, the only person he'd played that song for. At lunch, Nathaniel pushed his plate away untouched. He wasn't hungry. He needed answers. By late afternoon, he had Mark book him a table at the upscale restaurant where the catering agency often sent staff for large events. He didn't tell Mark why. The place was half full when he arrived. Linen tablecloths, low lighting, the scent of rosemary and butter drifting from the kitchen. Nathaniel sat where he could see the back entrance. At 6:12 p.m., she walked in carrying her black work shoes in one hand, wearing the same worn boots from the night before. She didn't see him at first. She tied on an apron, smoothed her hair back, and stepped into the dining area with a tray of sparkling water. Nathaniel waited until she passed his table. Emma. Her eyes flicked to him, then away just as fast. I'm working. I'll be quick. You won't. Still, she set the tray down at a nearby table and came back, folding her arms. What do you want? You know who I am, he said. You knew before last night. Her gaze didn't waver. You're a billionaire CEO. Everyone in this city knows who you are. That's not what I mean. He leaned forward slightly. Grace Marlowe. She was your mother. A pause sharp. Deliberate. Emma's shoulders tensed, but her face stayed still. She was, she said finally. The clink of silverware and low murmur of other conversations filled the space between them. She never told me she had a child, Nathaniel said. She never told me she had you, Emma replied. He sat back, caught between 100 questions and the need to choose the right one. Why didn't you say something? Because you left her. The words landed with more force than her soft tone should have allowed. She was 17. I was barely older. My family. Your family didn't approve, Emma cut in. She told me enough to guess the rest. Nathaniel's hand tightened around his glass. That song. She taught it to me, Emma said. Said it was the only thing she kept from you that wasn't bitter. A waiter appeared, asking if they needed anything else. Emma shook her head quickly and stepped back. I have to get back to work. Emma, he said, standing as she turned away. If she kept that song, she didn't hate me. Emma glanced over her shoulder, eyes unreadable. She didn't hate you, but she didn't forgive you either. By the time Nathaniel left, the snow was falling harder, covering the sidewalks in a thin sheet of white. He slid into the back seat of the waiting car, his mind a tangle of memory and what-ifs. Mark called from the front. We have the gala follow-up meeting tomorrow at 9. Press wants a statement. Nathaniel barely heard him. He was thinking about Grace's smile, about a 17-year-old version of himself making promises he couldn't keep, and about a girl named Emma who carried the echo of both their lives. The next day, he was at his office early, staring out at the snow-covered rooftops. Mark knocked once before stepping in. We have a problem. What kind? Emma quit the agency this morning. No forwarding contact. She's gone. Nathaniel turned from the window, a slow, deliberate movement. Then find where she went, he said. Mark hesitated. And if she doesn't want to be found? Nathaniel's voice was quiet, but there was no mistaking the resolve. She came into my life with a song that only belongs to 2 people, her mother and me. She doesn't get to disappear without an explanation. That night, Nathaniel walked into his penthouse study, dim lights spilling across the grand piano in the corner. He sat, fingers hovering over the keys, and played the melody for the first time in years. Halfway through, he stopped, hands resting in his lap. Somewhere in the city, Emma knew this tune as well as he did. And no matter how far she ran, the notes would find her. Because, for both of them, it wasn't just music. It was unfinished business. And Nathaniel Cole had never been one to leave anything unfinished. 3 days later, the snow in the city had turned to slush, lining the curbs like dirty lace. Nathaniel stepped out of the black SUV, scanning the modest brick building in front of him. It wasn't the kind of place billionaires were often seen peeling paint on the stair rails. A buzz-in entry with 2 letters missing from the panel. Mark stood beside him, glancing at his notes. She's been staying here, he said. Top floor, back corner. Rents the room weekly, cash only. Nathaniel's jaw worked as he looked up at the narrow windows. Stay here, he told Mark. Inside, the hallway smelled faintly of old carpet cleaner and someone's leftover dinner. He climbed the stairs, each creak underfoot echoing in the quiet. At the last door on the left, he paused, then knocked twice. It took a moment before the door cracked open. Emma's face appeared, her eyes widening when she saw him. How? He didn't give her a chance to finish. We need to talk. She hesitated, then opened the door just enough for him to step inside. The room was small, a twin bed pushed against the wall, a chipped dresser, and a single chair by the window. A kettle steamed softly on a hot plate. You've been following me, she said, folding her arms. Yes. That's not normal. Neither is showing up in my life playing the one song that ties me to someone I lost decades ago. She moved to the window, looking out at the gray street below. I told you, my mother taught me that song. Nathaniel's voice softened. Grace. Emma flinched barely, but he saw it. She was the best part of my life once, he said quietly. And the worst thing I ever lost. Emma didn't turn. She didn't think you'd come looking for her. Ever. I didn't know where she was. She didn't want you to know. Silence filled the space between them, heavy and fragile. Nathaniel took a step closer. What happened to her, Emma? Finally, she turned. Her eyes were brighter now, but not with anger, something closer to hurt. She got sick, worked until she couldn't stand anymore. I was 15 when she died. The words hit him harder than he expected. He reached for the back of the chair, steadying himself. And no one told me? She didn't want you at the funeral. She said you'd only remember the girl you loved, not the woman she became. Nathaniel's throat tightened. She was wrong. Maybe, but that's what she believed. Emma crossed her arms again, but her voice was softer now. I'm not here to reopen old wounds, Mr. Cole. I'm here because I have bills to pay, and playing piano at that gala was the only way to cover this month's rent. He studied her, really studied her, in the muted light. She had Grace's eyes, yes, but also the stubborn set of her jaw, the same quiet dignity. You could have told me who you were, he said. And what would that have done? You'd offer money, a job, maybe even guilt. You think that's all I have to give? It's what people like you give when they don't know what else to do. The words weren't cruel, just tired. A car horn blared outside, startling them both. Nathaniel stepped back, breaking the tension. I can't change the past, he said. But I can make sure you don't struggle like this again. Emma shook her head. You can't fix everything with money. Then tell me what will. She hesitated, eyes flicking to the floor. I don't know, but it's not a check. Nathaniel reached into his coat pocket, pulling out a small, worn velvet box. He opened it to reveal a delicate silver bracelet, its clasp slightly bent from age. She left this with me the last time I saw her, he said. Said it belonged to her mother. I think she'd want you to have it. Emma's breath caught, but she didn't reach for it. I can't take that. It's yours. She looked at him for a long moment before finally, reluctantly, accepting it. The kettle clicked off, filling the room with a faint hiss. Emma set the bracelet on the dresser and wrapped her arms around herself. I need time, she said. I can give you that, Nathaniel replied. He moved toward the door, but paused with his hand on the knob. When you're ready, I want to tell you everything about me, about Grace, about why I left. Emma didn't answer right away. When she did, her voice was almost a whisper. Then you'd better be ready to hear everything, too. Outside, the cold air bit at Nathaniel's skin as he descended the steps. Mark looked up from the SUV. Well? She's not running anymore, Nathaniel said. But this isn't over. As the car pulled away, he glanced once more at the building in the rearview mirror. Somewhere inside, Emma was holding a piece of her mother's past and maybe, just maybe, the beginning of his own redemption. Because in a city where people came and went like passing seasons, he'd just found the one person he couldn't let disappear again. The next week came with bitter wind and skies, the color of steel. Nathaniel stepped out of the elevator onto the 42nd floor of Cole Tower, scanning the open-plan workspace where his senior staff buzzed over quarterly reports. Mark was waiting by his office door, holding a slim folder. Background on the Marlowe Scholarship Program, Mark said, passing it over. If you're serious about doing this, it's going to raise questions. I'm serious, Nathaniel replied. He set the folder on his desk and opened it. Inside was a draft press release. Cole Industries launches. Grace Marlowe Music. Fellowship Supporting Young Talent, in Honor of a Lost Friend. Nathaniel read the headline twice before closing the folder. It's not just a headline, he said. It's a promise. 2 days later, the fellowship announcement hit the business pages. Photographers swarmed the marble steps of Cole Tower as Nathaniel stepped out to address them. He spoke briefly about Grace's love of music, about the importance of giving opportunities to those with talent but no means. What he didn't mention, what no one else knew, was that the program was his way of drawing Emma out of the shadows. That evening, he found her at the small cafe near her apartment, sitting at the back with a book and a chipped mug of coffee. She looked up when he approached, surprise flashing in her eyes. "Another coincidence?" she asked dryly. "Not even close," Nathaniel said, sliding into the seat across from her. He pulled a flyer from his coat pocket and set it on the table. "This fellowship launches next month. I want you to apply." Emma didn't touch the paper. "I'm not a charity case." It's not charity," he said. "It's recognition. You're a gifted pianist, Emma. This could give you resources your mother never had." She gave a short laugh. "And if the board finds out you handed it to me, they'll thank me when the program gets its first success story." They sat in silence for a moment, the hum of the espresso machine filling the space. Finally, Emma reached for the flyer, scanning it with guarded eyes. "This says it covers tuition at any music conservatory in the country," she murmured. "That's the idea. And what if I don't want to leave?" "Then you'll play here," he said. "On your terms, not because you're filling in for a no-show at a gala." Her gaze flicked up to meet his. "You're trying to make up for 20 years in one gesture." "No," he said quietly. "I'm trying to open a door you didn't know was there." The next week, she agreed to audition for the program's selection panel, though only after he promised to let her walk away if she felt pressured. The day of the audition, Nathaniel waited in the back of the conservatory's recital hall. The panel of judges sat in the front row, murmuring to one another as Emma took her seat at the grand piano. She began to play not the song from the gala, but something brighter, alive with confidence. Nathaniel watched the judges' pens still on their notepads. When she finished, the room was silent for a breath before filling with applause. Outside, as snow flurries drifted past the conservatory steps, Emma pulled her coat tight around her. "Don't read into it," she said when she caught him smiling. "Too late," Nathaniel replied. Before she could respond, a voice called out from across the street. Reporters. Cameras. Microphones shoved forward. "Mr. Cole, is it true you've been seen meeting privately with one of the fellowship candidates?" "Emma, are you and Nathaniel Cole related? Why didn't you disclose your connection before the audition?" Emma froze, the color draining from her face. Nathaniel stepped in front of her, raising a hand. "No more questions tonight," he said firmly. But the damage was done. By morning, gossip columns would spin their own story. Later, back at his penthouse, Nathaniel stared out at the city lights, knowing the fallout was coming. Emma had trusted him enough to audition. Now the whole city might see her as nothing more than a headline. And this time, if she walked away, he wasn't sure she'd come back. By morning, the headlines were everywhere. Billionaire's Fellowship. Under fire. Nepotism or romance? Who is Emma Cole, and why is she tied to Nathaniel Cole's past? Nathaniel tossed the folded paper onto his desk, jaw tight. Mark hovered by the doorway. "They're running with it," Mark said. "Every network, every blog. We can issue a statement." "Number." Nathaniel's voice was calm but final. "Statements won't stop them from tearing her apart." Across town, Emma sat in the cramped kitchen of her apartment, her phone buzzing non-stop on the table. Half the messages were from unknown numbers reporters, no doubt. The rest were from the fellowship committee, assuring her the audition results were still being deliberated. She shut the phone off and buried her face in her hands. She'd survived enough gossip in her life to know it didn't fade quickly. But this was bigger. A sharp knock on the door made her flinch. "Emma, it's me," Nathaniel's voice called. She hesitated before unlocking the door. He stepped inside, bringing with him the smell of cold air and expensive cologne. "You shouldn't be here," she said, "and you shouldn't be dealing with this alone." She moved to the counter, putting space between them. "Do you know what they're saying?" "I've read it all." "Then you know they think I'm sleeping my way into that fellowship." Her voice cracked on the last words, but she forced herself to meet his eyes. Nathaniel stepped closer. "And you know that's not true. which means their words don't define you. Easy for you to say you've got a PR team to clean up your messes. I've got nothing. He exhaled slowly. Then let me be that team. That afternoon, he called a press conference not from the Cole Tower steps, but from the small recital hall where Emma had auditioned. Cameras clicked as he stood at the podium. This fellowship exists to honor the memory of Grace Marlowe, a woman who changed my life, he began. Emma Cole is her daughter. She is talented, driven, and earned her place among the finalists on merit alone. When a reporter shouted a question about their relationship, Nathaniel didn't flinch. My relationship with Emma is one of respect for her as a musician, and for the legacy she carries. Anything beyond that is private, and speculation demeans us both. Emma watched the conference live from the hallway, hidden just out of sight. Hearing her mother's name spoken like that in public, with pride made something shift inside her. When Nathaniel stepped away from the podium, she slipped out before he could see her. She wasn't ready to stand beside him in front of flashing bulbs. Not yet. That night, Nathaniel found her back at the cafe. She was in her usual corner booth, stirring a cup of tea gone cold. "You didn't have to do that," she said without looking up. "Yes, I did." He slid into the seat across from her. "You think this will ruin your chances? It won't. The judges saw what you can do. And if they believe the rumors, then they're not worth playing for." For a moment, neither spoke. Outside, snow drifted lazily past the window, blurring the streetlights. Finally, Emma said, "You talk like someone who's used to winning." He smiled faintly. "I talk like someone who knows the value of fighting for what matters." She didn't answer, but she didn't walk away either. When Nathaniel left the cafe that night, he knew the battle wasn't over. Public opinion would take time to shift, and Emma's trust was still fragile. But she hadn't closed the door on him and in his world. That was as good as a first victory. The next few days passed in a strange quiet. The gossip columns moved on to fresher scandals, but the sting of their words lingered like frost that refused to melt. Nathaniel hadn't seen Emma since the cafe. He told himself she needed space. What he didn't admit, even to Mark, was how much he hated giving it to her. On Friday evening, just as he was about to leave the office, his phone buzzed with an unknown number. He almost ignored it, but something made him answer. "Mr. Cole?" A familiar voice, hesitant, almost unsure. "Emma? Are you busy?" Nathaniel stood, already reaching for his coat. "Where are you?" 20 minutes later, his car pulled up to a modest brick church on the south side of the city. The steps were slick with melting snow, the old stained glass windows glowing softly from inside. Emma was waiting near the door, bundled in a thick scarf, her breath puffing in the cold. "You came," she said, as though she hadn't been sure he would. "You asked," he replied. Inside, the church was warm, filled with the faint scent of old wood and candle wax. Emma led him down a narrow hallway to a small side room. A battered upright piano sat in the corner, its wood scratched, a few keys yellowed with age. "This was my mother's favorite place," she said, resting a hand on the lid. "She used to come here when she didn't have money for practice space. The pastor let her play as long as she wanted." Nathaniel glanced around. "Did you play here too?" Her smile was faint. "I learned here. Same bench, same out-of-tune middle C." She sat down, running her fingers lightly over the keys. The first notes were soft, almost shy, but then the melody grew warm and full, filling the little room. Nathaniel recognized pieces of classical arrangements woven with her own flourishes, bits of music that didn't belong to any sheet but to memory. When she finished, she didn't look at him. "She taught me to play the way she played for you, like the music was a conversation, not a performance." Nathaniel's throat felt tight. "Why bring me here?" "Because this is the part of my life the papers can't print," she said. "This is where she was happiest, even when we had nothing." She stood and stepped aside, nodding toward the bench. "Your turn." He raised an eyebrow. "It's been years." "Then you'll be rusty." "That's fine." Nathaniel hesitated, then sat. His fingers hovered over the keys before pressing the first note. Their song filled the room, imperfect but still whole. Halfway through, he felt her presence beside him, her hands joining his on the keys. For a moment, there was no distance, no scandal, no history, just the music that had bound all three of them across decades. When the last note faded, they sat in silence. Emma's gaze lingered on the keys. "You really loved her, didn't you?" With everything I had, Nathaniel said. And I failed her anyway. Emma turned to face him. She never called you a failure. She called you a boy who didn't know how to fight for her. The words landed deep. Outside, the snow had started again, falling in slow spirals under the streetlights. Nathaniel walked her to the curb, where a single street lamp cast a circle of light around them. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For letting me in." Emma studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Don't make me regret it." As he watched her walk away into the drifting snow, Nathaniel knew something had shifted. He'd been chasing her for answers, for truth. Now he was chasing her for something far more dangerous: hope. 2 weeks passed, and for the first time since the gala, Nathaniel felt the city breathe differently around him. Emma hadn't disappeared. They'd met twice quietly, away from cameras, sharing coffee, short walks, and conversations that lingered longer than either admitted. But the peace didn't last. It was a Tuesday morning when Mark stepped into Nathaniel's office, face tight. "You should see this." He set a tablet on the desk. The headline glared in bold letters. "Grace Marlowe's daughter to expose billionaire's past exclusive interview tonight." Beneath it, a blurry photo of Emma leaving the church where they'd played together. Nathaniel's eyes narrowed. "This is false. They're claiming she's agreed to sit down with a network anchor and tell the untold story of Grace and you." "Oh, she hasn't," Nathaniel said flatly. Mark hesitated. "Then someone's speaking for her." Across town, Emma was at her part-time job shelving books at the community library when her phone lit up with 10 missed calls. The first voicemail was from a reporter, the second from the fellowship director. The rest were strangers demanding the truth. By the time Nathaniel arrived, she was pale and visibly shaken. "They're saying I'm selling some tell-all," she said, pushing her phone across the table. "I don't even know this reporter." "They're baiting you," Nathaniel said. "If you stay quiet, they'll run whatever version suits them. If you speak, you risk giving them a headline to twist." Emma sank into the chair. "What am I supposed to do?" That night, Nathaniel made a decision. They would attend the fellowship's gala dinner together publicly. No hiding, no sneaking out back doors. "It's a risk," Mark warned as he reviewed the guest list. "It's a statement," Nathaniel replied. "If she walks in with me, no one else gets to speak for her." The night of the gala, the hotel ballroom shimmered under crystal chandeliers. The city's elite milled around in tuxedos and gowns, champagne glasses in hand. When Nathaniel walked in, Emma was on his arm, wearing a simple navy dress that caught the light with every step. Conversations paused. Cameras turned. At the first flash of bulbs, she stiffened slightly. Nathaniel leaned down just enough for her to hear. "They can't hurt you if we don't let them." Midway through the evening, the MC called Nathaniel to the stage to speak about the fellowship. When he reached the podium, he didn't just talk about funding or music. "I'm standing here with someone who reminds me that legacies aren't just about what we leave behind, but who we choose to stand beside while we're here," he said, gesturing to Emma. "Her mother taught me the meaning of music. She teaches me the meaning of courage." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Cameras clicked like steady rain. After the applause, Emma slipped away to the balcony for air. Nathaniel followed, finding her leaning against the stone railing, city lights stretching beyond. "That was a lot," she said. "You handled it." She shook her head. "You handled it for me." He stepped closer. We handled it together." The moment hung there quiet, almost fragile, until a shadow moved in the doorway. A man in a rumpled suit approached, holding up a phone. "You should know," he said. "Someone just sent this to every news outlet in the city." He handed it to Nathaniel. On the screen was a scanned letter, yellowed with age. The signature at the bottom made his stomach twist. "Grace Marlowe." Emma leaned in. "What is it?" Nathaniel's voice was low. "It's a letter I never knew existed." "Oh," and as the weight of it settled between them, Nathaniel realized the final chapter of their past hadn't just arrived, it had been delivered straight into the hands of the world. The ballroom noise faded as Nathaniel stared at the phone in his hand. The screen glowed with the image of the letter, the words written in Grace's looping, unmistakable script. His pulse thudded in his ears. Emma touched his arm. "Nathaniel, what does it say?" He swallowed hard. "Not here." They left the gala without saying goodbye, slipping past the valet and into the back of his car. Neither spoke during the drive. The city blurred by in streaks of gold and white until the car stopped in front of Nathaniel's penthouse. Inside, he pulled the phone from his pocket and handed it to her. Her eyes scanned the letter slowly, the tension in her shoulders tightening with each line. Nathaniel, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone. I didn't tell you about Emma because I didn't want her living in your world. Your world takes pieces of people until there's nothing left. You loved me once, but love wasn't enough to stand against them. I'm asking you, don't let her pay the price I did. Don't let her be a name in someone else's story. Let her choose her own. Emma set the phone down, her hands trembling. She kept you away on purpose. Nathaniel nodded slowly. Because she thought she was protecting you. Emma stepped back, wrapping her arms around herself. And now? You've pulled me right into the middle of everything she didn't want for me. That's not... He stopped himself. He wanted to say that's not true, but the truth was messier. Grace had wanted distance. Nathaniel had closed that distance. You've been trying to make things right for her, Emma said. But maybe that's not what I need. The words hit harder than the letter. Nathaniel took a slow breath. Then tell me what you need. Emma's gaze was steady now, even as her voice wavered. Space to decide if I can trust you not just to help me, but to let me live my life without steering it. He nodded once, the movement sharp but deliberate. You'll have it. But you should also know, I'm not walking away, not unless you tell me to. For a long moment they stood in the quiet of the penthouse. Outside, the snowstorm that had been threatening all day began to fall, fat flakes drifting past the windows. Emma finally spoke. I don't want to be my mother's shadow, and I don't want to be your redemption project. Nathaniel's voice was low. Then who do you want to be? She exhaled. Someone who decides her own story, even if it means walking away from you. The next morning, the leaked letter was on every news feed. Some commentators painted Grace as a tragic romantic, others as a woman too stubborn to accept help. Emma's name trended alongside Nathaniel's. She ignored the calls from journalists, the messages from strangers. Instead, she packed a small bag and left her apartment before sunrise. Nathaniel found out hours later from Mark, who tracked her phone to the train station. She bought a one-way ticket, Mark said. To where? Mark shook his head. No record, cash purchase. By the time Nathaniel reached the station, the platform was nearly empty. He spotted her by the far bench, a scarf pulled up against the cold, her small bag at her feet. You could have told me, he said. You could have let me go without chasing me, she replied. He took a step closer. Grace wanted you to have your own life. I understand that now. But she also wanted you safe. I can't stop caring about that. Emma's eyes softened just a fraction. Then care enough to let me find out who I am without you defining it. The train whistle cut through the air. Nathaniel searched her face for something permission, a sign to fight harder, but all he saw was resolve. He nodded slowly. You know how to find me. She picked up her bag and boarded without looking back. As the train pulled away, Nathaniel stood on the platform, the cold biting through his coat. The letter had given him truth. Emma had given him boundaries. And now, for the first time in years, he had to face the possibility that love meant letting go, at least for now. But deep down, he knew their story wasn't finished. Not when a song still bound them. Not when her mother's memory lived in both of them. Some ties, he thought, aren't meant to be cut. They're meant to be followed no matter how far the train carries them. 3 months passed. The snow had melted, replaced by the restless winds of early spring. Nathaniel's days blurred into meetings, travel, and the mechanical rhythm of business. He attended the fellowship finals without Emma, shook hands with the winners, and smiled for the cameras, though it felt like going through the motions. Her absence was a quiet ache, one he carried into boardrooms and empty penthouse nights alike. One rainy Thursday afternoon, Mark stepped into his office, holding a plain white envelope. This came for you, he said. No return address, hand, delivered to the front desk. Nathaniel took it, his chest tightening as he recognized the neat handwriting on the front. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Nathaniel, I'm not running. I just needed to know who I was when I wasn't Grace's daughter or Nathaniel Cole's. Anything. I've been teaching music in a small town 2 hours away. The kids here remind me of why my mother loved the piano they play because it makes them feel alive. If you want to visit, the church has Thursday night recitals. No press, no speeches, just music. Emma. That evening, without telling anyone, Nathaniel drove the 2 hours out of the city. The rain turned to mist as he pulled up in front of a small brick church lit from within. Through the open doors, he heard the faint, uneven notes of a child learning a song. He stepped inside quietly. The sanctuary was modest, with wooden pews and a small upright piano at the front. Emma sat beside a boy of about 10, guiding his hands across the keys. She didn't see Nathaniel until the boy ran off to join a group of kids near the side door. "You came," she said, standing but not moving toward him. "You invited me," he replied. They sat in the front pew as the recital began. One by one, children played simple pieces, hesitant, clumsy, but full of heart. Nathaniel watched Emma smile at each of them, clapping just as warmly for a halting "twinkle, twinkle" as for a polished Mozart minuet. When the last student finished, Emma walked to the piano. "This is one my mother taught me," she told the small audience. "She said it was a gift she wanted me to carry always." The first notes of their song filled the church. Nathaniel's throat tightened, the sound pulling him back to a winter night, a gala, and the shock of seeing her for the first time. But this time, there was no crowd, no scandal, just Emma, the music, and the quiet truth between them. When she finished, she didn't return to the bench. She walked straight to him. "I'm not asking you to be part of this," she said softly. "I'm telling you that you can be, if you can accept me as I am. Not as Grace's echo, not as someone to fix, just me." Nathaniel rose, meeting her gaze. "Then let me be clear. I don't want to fix you, Emma. I just want to be here. Wherever here is for you." "Oh." For a long moment, they stood in the middle of the emptying church, the sound of children's laughter drifting in from outside. Then, almost shyly, she reached for his hand. Later, as they walked to his car, Nathaniel glanced at her profile in the lamplight. "Your mother was wrong about one thing," he said. "Oh?" "She thought love wasn't enough to fight the world. But I think when it's the right person, it is." Emma's smile was small but real. "Then I guess we'll find out." Back in the city, the world would still spin with its rumors and demands. But here, in the quiet glow of a church where music had saved them both in different ways, Nathaniel knew this was the start of a new chapter, one written not out of guilt or legacy, but choice. And for the first time in years, he felt like the song was finally resolving, not into an ending, but into something lasting. The weeks after that night at the church felt different, lighter, though neither of them would have dared to call it easy. Nathaniel began making the Thursday evening drive like clockwork. No driver, no security detail. Just him, the open road, and the quiet anticipation of hearing her play again. Sometimes, they'd share dinner in the small diner 2 blocks from the church. Sometimes, they'd walk along the quiet main street, talking about nothing and everything. But Nathaniel noticed something else. Emma no longer looked over her shoulder for flashing cameras. She no longer tensed at the mention of the city. She was finally breathing without bracing for the next headline. One Thursday, the church was already full when Nathaniel arrived. Parents lined the pews, and the soft murmur of conversation filled the air. Emma was at the front, organizing sheet music for her students, her hair tied back in a loose knot. When she spotted him, she smiled, not the cautious, polite curve of lips he'd first known, but a real smile, warm and unguarded. "You're early," she said. "I like seeing the warm-up," he replied, taking a seat near the front. The recital began. One by one, the children played, each greeted with applause. Nathaniel clapped along, feeling oddly proud of kids he'd never met before. Halfway through, Emma introduced a girl of about 12. "This next piece," she said, "was written for someone very important to me. Someone who taught me that music isn't just sound, it's connection." She didn't look at Nathaniel, but he felt the words like they were aimed straight at him. The girl played a delicate, uncertain rendition of their song. Nathaniel caught Emma watching from the sidelines, her eyes soft. After the recital, while parents gathered their children, Emma came to sit beside him in the front pew. "You didn't have to drive all the way here every week," she said. "Maybe not," Nathaniel replied, "but I wanted to." She studied him for a moment. "And if I told you I'm not coming back to the city, then I'd keep coming here," he said simply. They walked out together into the cool spring night. The main street was nearly empty, the lamplight spilling across the pavement. Nathaniel stopped outside the diner. "Emma, I need to ask you something." Her brow furrowed. "You're making that face again. The one you make before a board vote, or a very expensive mistake. He almost smiled, but his voice stayed steady. I don't want to keep showing up in your life as a visitor. I want to be part of it, wherever that means living, however that means adjusting. She glanced toward the church, then back at him. That's not the life you're used to. No, he admitted. But I'm learning that the life I'm used to isn't the one I want anymore. They stood there for a long moment, the hum of a distant streetlight, the only sound. Finally, Emma let out a breath. Let's not decide everything tonight. That's fair, Nathaniel said. She smiled faintly. But you can buy me pie. Inside the diner, the waitress poured coffee into mismatched mugs and slid a plate of apple pie between them. They ate in companionable silence. The kind that didn't need filling. Halfway through, Emma said quietly, You know, my mother would have liked you better now than she did back then. Nathaniel looked up. Because I've changed? Because now you listen, she said, instead of trying to orchestrate everything. When he drove back to the city later that night, he realized she was right. The man who'd first seen her at the gala had been chasing a memory, trying to fix the past. The man driving away from that small town was learning how to build something in the present. And for the first time, he wasn't afraid of where that road might lead. It was a Monday morning when the old world came crashing back. Nathaniel was in his penthouse kitchen, coffee in hand, scrolling through overnight emails when Mark called. You need to come in, Mark said without preamble. What happened? There's been a breach. One of our suppliers sold internal contract data to a competitor. It's already in the press. An hour later, Nathaniel was in the 42nd floor boardroom of Cole Tower, the table crowded with legal counsel, PR managers, and department heads. The air was thick with tension. This is corporate espionage, the head of legal said. If we don't respond aggressively, we risk losing major accounts. Every instinct says we need to cut ties, sue, and make a public example, Mark added. But, Nathaniel's voice was low. But the supplier is a family-run shop in the Midwest. If we destroy them, we wipe out 40 years of livelihood for a town that depends on them. Nathaniel leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. 6 months ago, the decision would have been easy, decisive, ruthless, and aimed solely at protecting Cole Industries. Now, he heard Emma's voice in his head. You listen now, instead of orchestrating everything. We're going to handle this differently, Nathaniel said finally. Quiet negotiations. We recover what was lost, they clean house, and they get one chance to prove they can operate without compromise. No press circus? The room erupted in protests. That's a risk, legal argued. The shareholders, we'll see the results, Nathaniel cut in. Not the headlines. That evening, he made the drive to the small town again. Emma was in the church, running through scales with 2 students. When she saw him standing in the back, she wrapped up quickly and walked over. You look like you've been in meetings all day, she said. I have, he admitted. And for once, I didn't burn the place down. She raised an eyebrow. That's good, I think. It's different, he said. I handled a situation today the way I think you would have. Gave someone the chance to fix a mistake instead of ending them over it. Emma smiled faintly. You're learning mercy. From the best, he replied. They walked out into the cool night air. Main Street was quiet, the shop windows glowing softly. Nathaniel hesitated before speaking again. Part of me worried that if I kept making trips out here I'd lose my edge. Turns out maybe I was supposed to. Emma glanced at him sideways. You're not losing it. You're just using it differently. He stopped walking. Do you think you could ever come back to the city? Not to live under its noise, but to bring this, he gestured toward the church in the distance. Into it? She didn't answer right away. Maybe. But if I do, it'll be on my terms. I wouldn't want it any other way, Nathaniel said. When he drove back that night, he realized something. The old Nathaniel Cole would have called the day a compromise. The man driving away now knew it was a win. Not for the company, not for his public image, but for the kind of life he wanted to build one Emma might someday choose to share. 2 weeks later, Nathaniel was in his office late, reviewing quarterly projections, when his phone buzzed with a text. Emma, I might have something to show you. Are you free this weekend? Nathaniel's fingers stilled on the keyboard. Nathaniel, always. Where? Emma, not here. Your world. Saturday morning, he pulled up outside the church, expecting another small-town recital. Instead, Emma emerged in a tailored coat, carrying a folder under her arm. "You're driving," she said, sliding into the passenger seat. As they headed toward the city, she stayed quiet, gazing out at the passing fields. Eventually, the skyline rose in the distance, steel and glass catching the sun. She directed him not to Cole Tower, but to a modest brick building on the city's east side. "This used to be a community center," Emma explained as they stepped inside. Dust coated the floor, but sunlight streamed through tall windows. "It's been closed for years. The city wants to sell it." Nathaniel looked around. "And you want to buy it?" She nodded. "Not for me, for a music program. A place where kids can come after school, learn, practice, like my mother did in that church. I've been talking to some local teachers. They're on board." Nathaniel smiled faintly. "And you brought this to me because—" Emma hesitated. "Because I can't do it alone. But I also don't want it to be your project. I want it to be ours, or not at all." He walked slowly through the space, imagining it alive with sound pianos, violins, laughter. "What's the price?" She opened the folder, showing him estimates, grants, and a fundraising plan. She'd done her homework. "This is solid," he said. "It's not charity, it's an investment in the city." They spent the rest of the morning walking the building, her explaining her vision, him asking questions. For once, they were not talking about saving each other from scandals or defending against headlines. When they stepped back into the sunlight, Nathaniel turned to her. "Let's do it." Her brow arched. "Just like that?" "Just like that," he said. "I'll handle the purchase. You run the program. Equal partners." That afternoon they went to lunch at a quiet cafe nearby. Emma was still flipping through her notes when Nathaniel said, "You know, this is the first time you've brought part of your world into mine without me chasing it." Emma smiled. "And it's the first time you've said yes without trying to change the plan." The next week was a blur: paperwork, city meetings, contractors. Nathaniel cleared his schedule for the project's initial phase, shocking his board by skipping 2 high-profile investor events. On Thursday evening, he drove Emma back to the small town for her regular recital. This time, she invited a handful of her students to see the city site that weekend. "You're really doing this," Nathaniel said as they pulled up to the church. "We're really doing this," she corrected. When the recital ended, one of the younger students ran up to Nathaniel. "Miss Emma says we're going to have a place in the city to play music. Is that true?" Nathaniel crouched to the boy's level. "It's true, and I expect you to be there opening night." The kid grinned and darted off. Emma watched the exchange, a quiet pride in her eyes. Later, as they stood by his car, Nathaniel said, "You know, this bringing your music here, connecting it to the city, it's what your mother would have wanted. Not hiding from the world, but reshaping it." Emma's voice was soft. "Maybe. Or maybe it's just what I want." "Either way," he said, "it's happening." Driving back that night, Nathaniel realized the line between their two worlds had started to fade. The music program wasn't just a bridge for the children, it was a bridge for them. And for the first time, it felt like they weren't just reacting to life. They were building one. The grand opening arrived on a crisp Saturday afternoon. The old brick building on the east side of the city looked nothing like the dusty, forgotten shell Nathaniel and Emma had first stepped into weeks ago. Fresh paint gleamed under the sun, the tall windows polished until they caught and scattered light across the sidewalk. Above the double doors, a new sign read, "Grace House Community Music Center." Emma's choice. Nathaniel hadn't argued. Inside, the air buzzed with anticipation. Parents, children, and neighbors filled the refurbished hall, wandering between practice rooms and the small stage set up at the front. A ribbon stretched across the entrance, waiting for the ceremony. Nathaniel stood near the door, greeting donors and city officials. But every few minutes, his eyes found Emma. She moved through the crowd with easy warmth, introducing her students to reporters, explaining the programs to local teachers. This was her space, her vision brought to life, and he loved seeing her own it. When the MC called them forward, Nathaniel and Emma stood side by side before the ribbon. Cameras flashed, but for once, they weren't here for scandal or spectacle. Emma took the microphone first. "When I was a girl, my mother taught me that music was more than notes on a page. It was a way of telling the truth about who we are and what we feel. Grace House is here to give that chance to anyone who wants it, no matter where they come from or what they can afford." She handed the mic to Nathaniel. "Emma's right," he began, his voice carrying easily in the room. "For too long, I thought the value of something was measured in profit margins and contracts. This project taught me the real value is in the people it touches. Grace House isn't just a building. It's a promise." The applause that followed was warm, not perfunctory. Together, they cut the ribbon. The rest of the afternoon unfolded like a living postcard. Children tried instruments for the first time, fingers fumbling over piano keys or plucking tentative guitar notes. In one corner, a small group began an impromptu drum circle, the beat echoing off the high ceiling. Nathaniel watched Emma kneel beside a girl barely tall enough to reach the keys, guiding her hands through the opening bars of a simple tune. The girl's smile was wide, proud. But outside, not everyone was celebrating. Across the street, a familiar figure leaned against a lamppost, one of the reporters who'd hounded Emma after the gala months ago. Nathaniel's jaw tightened. Mark appeared at his side. "Want me to have him removed?" "No," Nathaniel said. "If he wants a story, he can watch this one play out the right way." Later, as the crowd began to thin, Nathaniel found Emma on the small stage, packing away sheet music. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Tired," she said with a smile. "But good tired. You did more than open a building today," he told her. "You opened a door. For a lot of people." Emma glanced at him. "We did." They stepped outside into the fading afternoon light. The reporter across the street raised his camera. But instead of turning away, Emma reached for Nathaniel's hand. "Let them take the picture," she said. "This is our story now." The shutter clicked. And for once, the sound didn't feel like an intrusion. It felt like a record of something worth remembering. That night, after the last guests left and the lights inside Grace House dimmed, Nathaniel stood alone in the hall for a moment. The echoes of the day, laughter, music, applause, still seemed to hang in the air. This wasn't just Emma's world or his. It was theirs. And it felt like the beginning, not the end. It was 3 months after the grand opening of Grace House, and the music center had become a heartbeat in its neighborhood. Every room hummed in the afternoons, pianos, violins, even a small choir practicing for their first spring concert. Nathaniel had kept his word. He was there often, not as a figurehead, but as someone who moved chairs, carried instruments, and fixed a broken light in the hallway without asking for attention. One evening, Emma found him in the main hall, leaning against the back wall, watching a group of students rehearse. "You're quiet tonight," she said, stepping beside him. "Just thinking about how far this place has come," he replied. "And how far I have." Emma tilted her head. "You've done a lot of work here, Nathaniel." He shook his head slightly. "You've done more. You changed the reason I work at all." The rehearsal wrapped up, and the kids spilled out into the warm evening air. Emma lingered at the piano, her fingers idly tracing the keys. Nathaniel approached. "Play it," he said softly. She looked up. "Our song?" He nodded. The first notes filled the empty hall, rich and steady. Nathaniel closed his eyes for a moment, letting the music pull him back to that first night at the gala, to the shock of recognition, to the months of struggle and rebuilding that followed. When the last note faded, she turned to him. "You never told me why did that song matter so much to you?" He hesitated, then answered. "Because it was the last thing your mother played for me." "The night before she left," Emma's voice softened. "And you carried it all this time." "I thought I was carrying her," he admitted, "but maybe I was waiting for you." For a long moment, the only sound was the creak of the old floorboards beneath their feet. Then Emma stood, closing the piano. "Nathaniel, I'm not my mother, and I'm not here to fill her place in your life." "I know," he said. "You're here because you choose to be, and I'm here because I choose you." They walked outside together, the evening air still warm from the day. Down the block, they could hear a street musician playing something bright and fast, the notes carrying on the breeze. Emma stopped halfway to his car. "Let's not rush home." He smiled. "Where do you want to go?" "Anywhere, as long as we walk there." They wandered the neighborhood, past cafes with open doors and bookshops with lights still on. The city felt different now, not a battlefield, but a place that could hold both of them without demanding they change who they were. As they reached the corner, Nathaniel glanced back toward Grace House. "You know," he said, I think your mother would have approved of this. Emma's hand slipped into his. Maybe. But even if she didn't, I do. Weeks later, Grace House hosted its first official concert. Every seat was filled, families spilling into the aisles. Emma conducted the children's choir herself, her face alight. Nathaniel sat in the back, letting the music wash over him. And when the choir's final song turned out to be the song, he felt something shift, not a breaking, but a settling. It was no longer just Grace's song. It was Emma's, theirs. When the applause finally faded, Emma walked off the stage straight toward him. She didn't say a word, just took his hand in front of everyone. And in that moment, Nathaniel knew this wasn't an ending. It was the start of the life they had built together, note by note, choice by choice. And for once, there was no past to chase, only the music carrying them forward.